Bonus content, value unit renovations. We're going to use this as our baseline, and we're going to do our renovations and value things in addition to this. So this will be our baseline, everything we did so far with the unleveraged, the leveraged, and coming up with our purchase price and return and all that kind of stuff. That's our base case. Moving forward, what we're going to look at are the impact that renovations are going to have on our cash flow. And most of the time, we're going to be looking at the unleveraged portion, because going into this process, we're going to make the assumption that we're going to be paying for all the renovations cash out of our own pocket. We're not going to finance those. We're going to make the assumption that we're going to pay all cash to do the renovations. And we're going to value each unit we renovate separately, starting with that vacant unit. So let's copy one of these headings. Bring it down to the bottom, create a new section, Unit Renovation, Unit 1. And down here, we'll start recording our changes that result from the unit renovation. So let's talk a little bit more about the renovation. We're going to value the vacant unit because we can start working on that one right away when we close on the property. And what we think we can do is we can increase the rent $125 a month. The cost to implement that renovation is $6,500. And we're going to want a 25% return on that project. If you recall, we've been looking at a 10% return and pretty much operating as it currently does. There's less risk in valuing the property the way it currently operates versus making changes to it. So when we make a change, that's taking on more risk, and we're going to want a bigger return on that. So instead of 10%, we want a 25% return. And depending on the magnitude of the change or how likely or unlikely it is to happen, maybe we want to even increase that to like 40% or 100%. And we're going to use that desired return and the change in cash flow to determine how much we're willing to pay for that renovation. We're looking at the renovation independently of everything else we've done so far. It's not necessarily going to impact your purchase price, although it could, and we'll see how. But we're looking at it independently, which means if you already own a property, you can do the same analysis to determine whether or not it makes sense to renovate that unit. So let's dig into this. So one thing I want to do here is I want to get a little closer to the unleveraged DCF analysis. So I'm going to hide all these rows. Hide rows. So that just hid them. They're still there. It goes from 47 to row 81. It's still there, but it's just hiding so that we can see this and more readily look down here and do some more work. So what's going to change here? Looking at the numbers, potential rent's going to change, right? It's going to go up $125 a month. If potential rent changes, we're going to have a change in vacancy and a change in collection loss. We're also going to have another thing called renovation downtime. The unit doesn't just get renovated at the snap of your fingers. A contract is going to take some time to do it. So we need to make an assumption for how long it's going to take them to do it. Property insurance, electric, gas, oil, water, sewer, property taxes, repair and maintenance. They're all probably going to stay the same or roughly the same. Property taxes might go up if your assessed value goes up, but we're not going to take that into account here. Property management fee, however, that's 6% of your effective rent. So if effective rent changes because potential rent changes and vacancy and collection loss change a little bit, property management fee is going to change a little bit. So that's going to change. Replacement reserves, probably not going to change. Net operating income will change. Sale of property will change. Remember, if we're making changes up here to income and expenses, our net operating income is going to change, and net operating income drives our sale price because we used a cap rate and applied it to this number. So if that number changes, sale price changes, and sales costs change because sales costs are dependent on the sale of the property price, which ultimately change all of our cash flows a little bit. And after we determine how much the cash flows change for each year, we're going to value that change and determine how much is that project worth. So let's start adding those new assumptions up here that we discussed in the previous slide. You'll often hear increases in rent called renovation premiums. I'll just call it that here. And that's going to be $125 increase per month. And it's important to take note of whether that's a number per month or per year because we will be adjusting this to an annual amount for our cash flows. Let's make this blue because it's an assumption. Renovation cost. We said it was $6,500. Make it blue. And make it $1. We discussed renovation downtime a little bit ago, but we didn't actually make an assumption for it. So renovation downtime. Let's assume it's going to take 2 months. Make the assumption blue. We'll also add our desired return. And that was 25%. And remember, when we talk about percents, we like to show some decimal places. Just 2 usually. And here's our renovation value. And that's the number we're going to come up with. Let's make this blue to be an assumption. Now let's come up with those new cash flows, the change in cash flow from the base scenario above, and value that change in cash flow and determine how much our renovation value is. So we'll start looking at potential rent. And for year 1, it's going to be an increase of $125 per month times 12 months gets you to an annual amount. And then I'm just going to increase this by the assumption amount up at the top, the 2.5% increase in potential rent. And that's the increase amount, so let's add it to the prior year amount. So the increase plus the prior year amount gives you the new total. And let's drag that formula across, change these to dollars, get rid of the decimal places, and there's our potential rent change. Next, vacancy. We need to multiply this times a negative vacancy amount. I'm going to reuse the vacancy from the unleveraged discounted cash flow analysis we did before. For some odd reason that showed up as a percent. Let's change that to dollars. Get rid of the decimal places. And we can do the same thing and drag that across. And there's our vacancy. Collection loss. The change in collection loss will be calculated the exact same way as vacancy, but using the collection loss number up here. Change this to a dollar amount. Get rid of the decimal places. Drag the formula across. And you have collection loss. Now let's move on to the renovation downtime. That's that new number we came up with. So if you recall, our prior rent, and let's add that up here. Original rent was $700 for this unit, right? It's a vacant unit, and we made a market-based assumption that it would be $700 per month for this unit as is. Let's change that to a dollar sign. Make it blue. So our renovation downtime is 2 months. Negative, because it's a negative amount. You're subtracting it from potential rent because this is your money you're not receiving while you renovate it. Times, open parenthesis, $700 original rent, plus the renovation premium. Okay? Parentheses change the order of operations. You may have heard that in grade school. The math in the parentheses happens before the math outside the parentheses happens. So you multiply the 2 months times the sum of these two things. You got it? This only happens in year 1 because you're not renovating again in year 2 or year 3. If you are, yeah, subtract more stuff, but we're making the assumption you make one renovation in year 1 and you reap the rewards of it in the future. So let's calculate the new effective rent. Add all that stuff together. Drag it across. Add a line on top to keep it separate from everything else. And there's your change in effective rent. In year 1, you're going to lose some money. And we didn't even talk about the renovation cost yet. And in year 2 and year 3, you reap some of the rewards of the renovation. Next, we'll look at the costs. Next, we'll look at the operating expenses. The only operating expense we're concerning ourselves with is property management. And that's going to impact our effective rent. Remember, what was it? It was 6%, I believe, of effective rent. So we're going to use those same numbers down here. equals property management times effective rent. Drag that formula across, and there's our change in property management fees. So the next thing we're going to do is calculate our net operating income. So you take your effective rent, subtract the operating expenses, do that for the next 2 years, and there's your NOI. Let's put that line on top to separate it from everything else. Great job. Next up is sale of property and sales costs. So with our new net operating income in year 3, we're going to calculate the increase in sales value based on that increased net operating income. So let's do, to make my life simpler, I'm just going to copy these 2 items, paste them down here. For sale of property, it's equals net operating income divided by the cap rate we chose up here, sales cap rate of 7.5%. There's the increase in value from a sale from that $1,300 more dollars in that last year. I'm going to get rid of the decimal places. The sales costs are negative 8% for sales costs times the sale of property price. So there's our change in sales costs as a result of the renovation. And then our new cash flow is, add all these together, drag that formula across, and here's your change in cash flow. I'm going to put a line on top to separate it from everything above it. So here's the cash flows we need to value to figure out whether or not it's worth it to do this renovation. So what we're going to do next is we're going to value these cash flows with a 25% desired return. And if the renovation value is more than the renovation cost, it makes sense for us to do it. So let's go ahead and do that. Equals, we're going to use the NPV formula, open parenthesis. We're using NPV because remember, we have a rate of 25%. And we have future cash flows, and we want to calculate how much is that worth to us today. So our rate is the 25%. Press comma, and then we highlight the values that we want to apply that desired return to over the next 3 years. Close parenthesis, hit enter. So the renovation value is $9,662. Let me get rid of the decimal places. And that is higher than the renovation cost of $6,500. So it does make sense for us to do this renovation because we're going to get our 25% return and then some. And how much is that and then some? Well, let's just subtract the 2. Equals renovation value minus the renovation cost. So the and then some is $3,000. So ultimately, what this number, renovation value, says, we'd be willing to pay up to $9,600 in renovation costs to get our desired 25% return. If it costs more than $9,600, we would pass on doing the renovations because we get less than 25% return. So our difference here is $3,100. The difference between the cost and what we're willing to pay ultimately if we had to. So let's calculate what the return really is. I'm going to adjust the desired return upwards until this number over here is 0 and until this is equal to $6,500. Let's go with 35%. Okay, I'm going to increase it to 45%. Okay, that went a little too high, but we're getting close. We're within $200 of our renovation cost. So we're looking at almost a 45% return. Let's just do 44%. See if that, okay? Let's try 43%. Okay, 43%. We are looking at a 43% return through doing this renovation, but our desired return is 25%. We will do this if we can get a 25% return. Anything over that is just icing on the cake. So let's go back up here to this desired return, change it back to 25%. I want to show you something really interesting. Here's how much wiggle room we have when it comes to costs. We could pay $9,600, but we only have to pay $6,500, which we have in excess of $3,100 left. What we can do if we wanted to get aggressive in pricing is we could literally increase the price we came up with when we valued the property earlier. And what I'm going to have to do here is unhide some things. Remember, we hid these earlier in the video. And what It didn't unhide everything. Let me do that again. Unhide rows. There we go. That's better. So back to our dashboard. What that means is this $3,000 of excess from the renovation, that's more than what it's going to cost us to renovate. We can add this onto our purchase price if we needed to get aggressive. So if you wanted to get really aggressive, you could add this $3,000 onto your purchase price. And pay $164,000. And if you do that for Unit 2 and Unit 3 and Unit 4, a couple $1,000 here, a couple $1,000 there, you're increasing your purchase price if you have to, and you're still getting a 10% return on the base deal. And if everything goes as planned, you're going to get your 25% return on your renovations. And that's how you can pay more for a property if you can add value to it. Now again, you do have to be careful about this because you can't make any guarantees that you're actually going to get this renovation premium. We're estimating about $125 a month in additional rent just for that one unit. And I actually have to change that to a dollar amount. The formatting is off. So there is risk inherent when you start projecting with value add. But this is how you do it. This is how pros do it. And I think you can see how methodical this is compared to what you're used to doing. So one thing I want to show you here is because we're increasing the maximum purchase price, our cap rate is going to go down. And to calculate the cap rate with that new maximum purchase price equals the net operating income for year one. Remember, we have to use year one for apples to apples comparison down there. This isn't a year two analysis. We're doing year one net operating income cap rate on year one. And then we're going to divide by that higher purchase price. And we're going to get a lower cap rate. In doing this, one thing I want to show you is to the rest of the market, you're paying a 7.45% cap rate for this property, right? If you went to the public records, or if someone's looking at this deal and went to the public records to see how much you paid for it and try to calculate what the cap rate is based on valuing the property as is with this up here, they're only going to see this picture. They're not going to know that you had this plan for renovations and you're going to be boosting your net operating income and boosting your cash flow in later years and getting a 25% return on the additional $6,500 you're going to invest in this deal down the road. This is just an example of how cap rate can be misleading. You don't know what the investor's plan is. So when you're researching cap rates or you learn about a cap rate on a deal that happened from a broker or other owners, you don't know what's really going on in the background. There could be other factors at work, or maybe there aren't. Most people buying 5-unit properties don't know how to do what you just learned how to do in this video and throughout the rest of the course. I believe your deals are going to make a lot more sense now, but this is just an example of why looking at external data without knowing the full picture, you don't want to just go and work with a cap rate because you learned about it somewhere. I'm going to buy it for this cap rate because that's what comps have traded at. Because again, someone looking at this deal doesn't know what your plan is here, what your cost is to renovate, how much you're going to increase the unit's rents. And this is just for one unit. You could go ahead and do this for another unit or 2, or 5, but just be careful you don't take too much risk. Because for our purposes, this is all unproven. You're taking a risk in trying to raise the rents. You're also taking a risk on your renovation cost. Let's say that a wall is opened up and there's a weird pipe passing through that wall that has to be rerouted. That's going to be additional cost. So there's risk inherent in that too. Additionally, when you're looking at smaller properties with 5 or so units, in many cases, each unit is unique in its own right. With the larger properties with like 100 or 200 units or sometimes 40 and 50 units, each unit is an exact mirror of the other units. All the units are basically the same, and it's cookie cutter. In old downtown townhomes that are converted to apartments at some point, each unit could be completely unique in every single way. So your renovation costs for a smaller property like this could be very different from unit to unit. You may find it feasible to do some renovations in some units and not feasible to do renovations in other units. That's why I suggest looking at each unit individually. Congratulations, you learned how to value apartment renovations like a pro, and you should feel very good about what you just learned.